Demi-Precentor Rudolf Shakov would never forget this moment. Strapped into the command couch of his 65-ton exterminator, racing up the scrubbed-covered side of Calicos Pass at the head of a strike team, he dared any of the 11th Arcturian aerospace pilots to make another run at him. The one fighter craft that had already tried was now a smoking debris field scattered over several hundred meters of rocky mountainside, having encountered the withering firepower of Shakov's Partisan air defense vehicles. He wouldn't mind force-feeding the pilots another lesson. 2 more Lucifers dove down after, but aborted when the Partisans filled the air with overlapping flak barrages. The pilots banked away, returning to the chaotic dogfight that raged over the pass and peaks of Thorin's Olympus range, properly leaving this ground battle in the capable hands of battlemechs. Across the pantheon of mechs and vehicles of the inner sphere, few prompt the level of terror aerospace fighter pilots feel when they see they are being tracked by a partisan. In a game of rock, paper, scissors combat between ground and air forces, the partisan is the jagged rock that cuts paper and crushes scissors. Designed by Callan Industries in 2791, a couple of decades after debuting the Rifleman and Jägermech platforms, the company was seeking to add to their success with a less technologically demanding vehicle design that could provide valuable anti-air protection. This was necessary as the First Succession War, which had kicked off in 2786, was reaching unparalleled levels of violence and destruction. Production of battlemechs that relied upon widespread logistics networks were the first to fall, and even localized issues could stop the lines for days, weeks, or indefinitely. Partisan was the perfect solution to continue production of the military equipment desired by the marketplace, in addition to however many riflemen and Jägermechs could be produced each year. Designed with simplicity in mind, the Partisan could be produced quickly and efficiently. The GM Superload 240 internal combustion engine was capable of pushing the 80-ton vehicle up to 54 kilometers per hour. This was deemed plenty for a tank that very rarely would see significant movement during battle. Protected by 6 tons of Star Slab 7 plate armor, the Partisan was unlikely to do very well in a stand-up fight with ground forces, but again, that wasn't within the vehicle's typical mission profile. It's not until the weapons and equipment loadout that the true value of the Partisan shines through. With 4 AC-5 autocannons installed into the turret, aided by a unique anti-air flak system, the Partisan could track up to 200 air targets at once. The system could then evaluate and prioritize targets before guiding the turret and allowing the crew to fire with greater accuracy. The ammunition provided by Callan Industries for the Partisan was specifically designed to carry a proximity fuse that would trigger the rounds to explode when near a target. In the unfortunate case when the AC-5s had to be turned on ground targets, the proximity fuse could be disabled to allow normal fire. To scare off infantry and light vehicles, a pair of standard machine guns were added to the front of the Partisan and fed by a half-ton of ammunition. Overall, the loadout is exactly what one would expect from an anti-air setup on a tank. The only significant downside was the limited 2 tons of ammunition that could be eaten up quickly with just 10 shots per autocannon. This really underlines the fact that Partisans were expected to be protecting stationary positions near those logistics hubs where they could be reloaded quickly. The fighting was a confusing mess. Bernard surveyed the landscape and saw in the distance even more Duchy forces pressing forward. Damn, so many of them. He watched a Partisan anti-aircraft vehicle down one of his Balak VTOLs. It careened wildly into the ground and exploded on impact. Another one of his tanks, an SM-1 tank buster, hit the Partisan with an autocannon burst that ripped the vehicle in half. A tire burst out and bounced away. Bernard watched it until it disappeared in the melee. In addition to being able to track so many targets at once, the systems of multiple Partisans could be linked to share targeting data and concentrate fire. The result was intensely accurate anti-aircraft fire, which was known for being able to sweep the skies clear of enemy threats. It was even possible for the crew of the Partisan to leave the vehicle with a hardwired system and still fire the autocannons from up to 20 meters away. In the most intense and dangerous situations, this could save the life of the crew should the Partisan take a devastating hit. As a result of Callan Industries' typical markets, most of the Partisans largely ended up among the units of the armed forces of the Federated Suns and the Free Worlds League, though not exclusively. This was a source of much frustration for the Draconis Combine, who discovered during their assault on the planet Dobson that aerospace fighters aren't the end-all be-all. Able to land their dropships unopposed, the Combine units began to build a beachhead, which included extensive use of their aerospace fighters. In the nearby city of Dobbyville, Federated Commonwealth defenders dug in and counted on their positions to help them outlast the imminent attack. When a wing of Combine fighters swooped down on the city in an attempt to soften up the defensive positions, they were met with a wall of very accurate anti-aircraft fire, which decimated the wing. 3 fighters fell in the initial contact, and when the fighters returned to take out the anti-aircraft positions, the Partisans were able to distract them for long enough that the other defenders were left largely unharmed. When the Combine ground forces closed on the city, they were unable to overcome the advantages of the fresh defenders and ultimately had to retreat. By the time the Combine dropships left Dobson, half of the fighters were destroyed. For reference, a typical DCMS combat wing consists of 3 companies or 36 fighters. 18 kills is pretty good. Now, there have been plenty of field refits for the Partisan over the years, and we're not going to hit every one of them for this video. What we are going to do is walk through some of the more notable designs, either for their lore or to help build a greater understanding of the possible loadouts one might encounter while out on the battlefields of the 31st and 32nd centuries. In 3002, someone had the bright idea of replacing the Partisan's 4 AC-5 autocannons with 5 AC-2s. Now, I'm not sure if this was done out of some sort of genuine desire to see what would happen, or if someone's Uncle Polly just needed to offload a bunch of AC-2s which had fallen off the back of a dropship on their way to Galatea. Regardless of the motivation, the AC-2 Partisan definitely is a thing, and maybe it really shouldn't be. Its one bright side was 4 tons of ammunition for the AC-2s, which means you could do much less damage for a much longer time. Joy. In 3017, an attempt was made to take the Partisan in a completely different direction with the replacement of the AC-5 autocannons with 4 long-range Missile 15 racks. While this could theoretically still be used against aerospace fighters, the more obvious application would be as a fire support vehicle for ground forces. The included 6 tons of ammunition was enough for 12 shots per launcher, which is fair as the LRM Partisan still isn't likely going to be going far from logistics lines. The 2 machine guns in the front of the vehicle were left alone, but received a full ton of ammunition. Overall, I like the LRM Partisan as an option for an LRM fire support unit should you want to go with something hefty and don't have a standard LRM carrier rolling around. The Partisan rolled its turret around and depressed its barrels. The paired flak cannons were good anti-fighter weapons, but they did journeyman work against the lightly armored battlesuits as well. The cannons blam rocked the ravine walls, and the sabot rounds knocked 3 of the Urban's elementals off their feet. When Callan Industries decided to take the leap with Helm Memory Core technology in the late 3050s, the resulting Partisan air defense tank saw substantial changes. The primary goal was to create a vehicle which could completely shut down Clan aerospace assets. The first and very costly step was the swap to a GM Super 240 Fusion engine, saying goodbye to the internal combustion engine propulsion. The top speed of 54 km per hour didn't change, but it did buy mass for use elsewhere. Both the comms and the targeting and tracking systems were upgraded to incorporate C3 technology, which further improved the Partisan's ability to track and take down targets in conjunction with others. 2 additional tons of armor were added to bulk up the vehicle's strength. Finally, the weapons loadout was completely changed to embrace a pair of LB-10X autocannons in the turret and backed up with a pair of AC-2s. With 15 shots per LB-10X and 45 shots split between the AC-2s, the Partisan air defense tank could persist and keep the skies clear for a considerable amount of time. There was a lot of interest in this upgraded Partisan by several great houses, though the production lines on Nanking ended up making delivery of orders a little bit of a challenge. As fans of the Sarna March will point out, technically it dissolved as a result of the Federated Commonwealth falling apart. The instability before the Civil War was further exacerbated by the Capellans, who ceded the former Sarna March worlds with insurgents. Firmly within the territories of sometimes contested and sometimes abandoned worlds was Nanking and those Callan production lines. Interstellar conflict set aside for the moment, the upgraded Partisan air defense tank was a solid, if expensive, new tech version of the platform. Combined with 2 variants that are slightly modified as command vehicles with Master C3 computers, the Partisan was able to demonstrate reliability and continued potent firepower well into the Civil War and the Word of Blake kerfuffle eras. Now, before we leave the 3050s, we do need to talk about the Partisan XL project. Apparently, someone at Callan decided that it couldn't hurt to have a premier version of the Partisan platform available for customers who wanted to splurge on their anti-air systems. The resulting Partisan XL tank was impressive, though the estimated price of roughly 12.5 million C-bills was equally breathtaking. Beside the XL engine, the Partisan was protected by 8 tons of ferrofibrous armor, which considerably bulked up the vehicle. Much like the air defense tank, the XL Partisan was equipped with a pair of LB-10X autocannons fed by 3 tons of ammunition and was aided by a C3 computer slave unit. Joining those LB-10Xs were a pair of Ultra AC-5 autocannons fed by 3 tons of ammunition. This pushed up the potential damage output of the Partisan considerably, especially in comparison to the original loadout. The overall usefulness of the XL Partisan is likely going to boil down to money. It can definitely clear the skies and even represents a serious threat to ground forces, but all that comes at a price many find out of their reach. Michelson banked hard and pushed lower to the ground, heading right to the top of the paved rise. The Crow anticipated his move and fired its nose-mounted laser, hitting the back end of the Donar. If the militia craft had a tail rotor, it would have been lost, but this was an airstream-controlled craft. The Donar danced slightly from the laser's impact and passed over the intersection, just as the Partisan anti-aircraft vehicle pulled up and locked on its weapons. The Defiant Shredder LB-5X autocannons littered the air with depleted uranium slugs. The Crow Scout slammed right into the field of fire. It attempted to pull up and away. The shells stitched a line up the bottom of the copter, splaying away armored plates. The Crow quaked under the impacts. Suddenly, fire erupted from 2 other sources. Leggett Singh's Panther and Nightholt's Black Knight both had been holed down behind the rise, waiting for their chance. Leaping down the timeline a bit to 3067, the inevitable Rotary autocannon upgrade variant arrived, and I can almost hear the audience cheering. Or maybe it's just the tinnitus getting worse. The RAC Partisan air defense tank retained the fusion engine upgrade and was protected by 9 tons of ferrofibrous armor, bulking it up yet again from earlier variants. The primary draw was the installation of 2 Rotary AC-5 autocannons into the turret, which were capable of producing what could be described as a wall of death for any aerospace asset that wanders too close. The 4 tons of ammunition offered only a glimmer of an opportunity to just wait out the fire, and the addition of 2 LB-2X autocannons added insult to injury. All of this was aided by a C3 computer. The damage potential of the RAC Partisan is considerable, and if used carefully, it could even represent a threat to heavy and assault battle mechs. Its drawbacks include cost at almost 5 million C-bills, and the Partisan's typical slow speed, which limits its battlefield utility. However, if you're a big fan of the Rotary autocannons, this is probably the Partisan you want to take to the ball. In the unseemably warm and radioactive 3070s, the Partisan air defense tank received its first official upgrade to cell power technology. The speed of the vehicle remained the same 350 that we know and love, and the ferrofibrous was set at 8 tons. The weapons and equipment were reminiscent of earlier builds with paired LB-10Xs and twin AC-2 autocannons. However, even with 3 tons of LB-10X ammunition and a ton of AC-2 ammo, there was still enough mass for an anti-missile system, 2 machine guns, and a C3 computer unit. I'm fond of the anti-missile system on a fire support unit like this, and I think it's appropriate for the Partisan since it really needs to make every armor point count. Theoretically, one could have just spent the weight from the AMS on additional armor, but that wouldn't be as fun. The Cell Partisan is solid, can hit quite hard in a variety of situations, and isn't quite as squishy as earlier variants. The last official variant we're going to cover today is the Partisan Heavy Tank powered by a fuel cell introduced by Callan Industries in 3090. It's not the newest of the possible variants, but I do think it's the best representative of what a modern Partisan can be at the tail end of the 31st century. As mentioned before, the Partisan was powered by a GM Electric 240 fuel cell, which maintained that classic 350 movement profile, yet weighed 9 tons less than an internal combustion engine. The soft and squishy crew inside were protected by 7 tons of heavy ferrofibrous armor, which was quite decent coverage. 40 points of protection on the front and 30 on the turret is enough to make an enemy think twice before just rolling up on you. The Partisan's primary weapons were a quartet of Ultra AC-5s fed by 4 tons of ammunition. Double firing increased the possible damage output of the original production Partisans by a significant amount. The 2 machine guns in the front were left in place along with their half-ton of ammunition in the body. All of the weapons were aided through the installation of a C3 computer slave unit. Finally, case was added to the vehicle to protect the crew from a fiery yet humorous death should the vehicle take any hits to the rapidly depleting supply of Ultra AC-5 ammunition. The Partisan heavy tank cell variety is a no-fuss, no-muss design which highlights the practical value of having a tank around that can clear the skies and hammer ground forces if necessary. In fact, one of my favorite anecdotes of the Partisan involves turning the guns on battle armor. Shocking, right? When the Republic of the Sphere sent a raiding force beyond the protection of the wall to hit the planet Barat, it seemed at first as though it would be an easy time against the meager garrison forces there. Upon closing in on the planet's refurbished Star League fortress, the Republic armed forces met with little resistance. 1 transport VTOLs packed with RAF soldiers in battle armor rolled up on the front gate to force it open. A concealed lance of Partisans opened up on them with everything they had. The transports were torn to shreds, and the surprised battle armor scattered under a hail of autocannon rounds and machine gun fire. Now left without much of their battle armor, the RAF had to retreat from the planet lest they be pinned down by harassing fire until a Capellan backup arrived to wipe out the Republic's force. Now before you run off to the video comment section to yell at me for forgetting your favorite Partisan variant, I would absolutely encourage you all to go out and check out the other options there are. Okay, maybe not the light Gauss version, but perhaps there are some fans out there who still are into that, so go wild. For the totally unofficial and non-canon Mech Frog variant, we needed something that could pack a wallop and put fear into the mech warriors who see a Partisan as an easy kill. I started with the original Partisan heavy tank chassis, swapped in a fusion engine, and packed on 8 tons of heavy ferrofibrous armor. The rest of the mass was devoted to cramming 2 Gauss rifles into the turret along with a medium pulse laser. 4 tons of ammunition can keep the Gauss rifles functioning through all but the longest battles, and the tank itself is protected by an anti-missile system and a Guardian ECM suite. The unsuspecting mech warrior who wanders too close to the Partisan MF could end up having a really bad day. Working in conjunction with other standard Partisan variants, a lance of the tanks could turn the tables and make the hunters the hunted. If you want to give it a try, I've included a Dropbox link to the record sheet in the video notes below. So why do we love the Partisan in all of its forms? I've appreciated it from a lore standpoint and an out-of-universe explanation of why aerospace fighters are limited in their impact on the battlefields of the 31st and 32nd centuries. Does it totally explain it? No, but it's better than just shrugging and saying, because big stompy mechs are fun. As rough a time that autocannons have on battle mechs in comparison to energy and missile weaponry, they do really well on tanks. The Partisan demonstrates this across more than a dozen different official variants that highlight various ballistics weapons systems. The look of the tank is solid and has always benefited from being one of Dwane Loose's art pieces and one of the limited number of color art pages from the 3026 technical readout. It's the combination of form and function that really helps the Partisan stand out as a BattleTech vehicle worth knowing and even using in your next combined arms game. With that, I'd like to thank you for sticking around and listening to me blather about BattleTech yet again. If you enjoyed this nonsense, don't forget to hit all the buttons so that YouTube knows it's a video worth showing to some new eyes out there. Going the extra step to becoming a channel member directly supports the creation of this and future videos. Without you, none of this would be possible, so I really appreciate it. Take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.